Hey, what's up guys, aarava here, and welcome back to a brand new video here today, where we're talking about game ideas for the next Formula 1 game, F1 2022. Now, it may seem a bit early for it, but like I say every year, this is the kind of right time of the year to start putting out ideas, throwing them into the public domain. Hopefully, maybe, you never know, one of, the community managers or whatever, someone from Cody's sees some of these ideas, and it's just also good to get a general buzz for next year's game already with these game ideas, and we can dream a little bit, because right now, as we speak, the next game is probably being made. The foundational building blocks of F1 2022 are being made right now, simultaneously, whilst they still make things like the new circuits for this year's game and patches. Cody's always now in the last couple of years have split their teams, and they've got one team working on next year's game, whilst you've got a smaller team working on this year's game and the kind of live updates and whatnot. So this is the time to throw out ideas, and it's an exciting, game. Next year's game is going to be very, very exciting. F1 2022, it's the first game that's going to be the proper next-gen release. This year's game was a transition, of course, because only this year, the back end of 2020 into this year, did the new consoles come out. So this was a transitional year. Next year will be the proper next-gen title for F1. I don't know whether that means they'll be releasing it or not on PS4 and Xbox One. I mean, the pattern seems to be developers are still going to be making games for those platforms. They're maybe just smaller, dumbed-down versions of their games, because a lot of people don't even have their hands on the new consoles yet due to stocks and whatnot. And then also next year's game is exciting because it's the first game that's going to be fully backed by EA. This year's game, Cody's essentially had the whole game almost made, by the time EA bought Codemasters. And this next game is going to be the first game where maybe EA can give Codemasters some more funding, more resources to build a bigger and better game and do more, because Cody's have always been a bit of a smaller studio, really punching above their weight and doing the most with what they've got. But now you've got EA, global studio, global company. They have so many different studios underneath them, and now Codemasters is one of those studios, which I want to clarify, by the way. People still mistakenly think that EA now make the F1 game. Cody's still make the game. Codemasters are still in charge of making the game. EA may just give them resources, funding, and may prod them to go in certain directions. Whether those are the right directions or not remains to be seen. We'll see in the years to come. But today, anyway, let's talk about game ideas. I asked you guys in a community post what you guys want to see in the next year's F1 game, and these are the top 7 ideas I got back from you guys. Number 1, this was the most thumbs up comment in the community post, was teammates letting each other through when relevant, smarter, realistic decisions essentially, and things like team orders as well, I'll chuck in there. So basically, even smarter AI, especially when it comes to your teammate potentially. I think I fully agree with this. There needs to be a system where they think about those decisions, whether you're in a better race strategy and you need to be let by, or even AI on AI decisions. So many times, sometimes we see teammates, when their cars are so equalized in a race, they'll hold each other up, and basically that kind of ruins the race for the AI. So they need to be a bit smarter realizing that. But I think also, especially for the player, for your team and my team career mode, for example, there should be things like team orders. You're able to tell your teammate to go through and overtake you, or I want to overtake you, slow down and let me through, and things like that. And just being a bit smarter on the fly, on circuit, and being a bit more realistic. In real life, engineers always are telling the drivers sometimes if things are better to let a car go, let your teammate through. He's on a different strategy, so you can let him through right now, but don't worry, you'll overtake him eventually because you're on the better strategy, we feel, on this side of the garage, for example. So yeah, just smarter AI teammates, I would say, when it comes to your own team, and then also AI to AI. But also in general, obviously, you'd hope every year the AI gets smarter, which thankfully, you got to hand it to Codemasters. In my opinion, for sure, every year you do see the AI getting better and better in terms of whether it's racing you wheel to wheel. So it's something that I've always seen a nice, upward trajectory. So I trust Codemasters to continue that path and to continue to make the AI better. There are still some niggling bits, like this man has said, where the teammates maybe don't let each other through. Those things, that takes it to that next level of realism. Number 2, and I said this for last year's game, we didn't get it. We've got the same thing as F1 2020. This next year, I, for one, think there's no excuse. We're on to the next gen, the proper next gen. You've got more funding, hopefully, from EA to try and build out a better system. there needs to be a better livery editor and helmet editor. There needs to be, I'm talking Gran Turismo levels of livery editing, Forza levels of livery editing on the F1 game. I want to be able to use shapes, essentially what I want to do on the consoles is I want to design a livery that I can design myself right now on PC with some Photoshop and the 3D model I can use for modding. I want you guys that use consoles to be able to do that with the controller and just use the editor like you can in Gran Turismo and Forza. And the same thing for helmets. So let's make shapes, patterns, and whatnot. I just don't think there's much of an excuse now, and I would love to hear the excuse if they give us one, if there's not a better livery editor now on next year's game. I was actually really, really sad that this year's livery editor was basically the same thing. Well, it is the same thing as F1 2020. I was very sad about that. And now, looking back at it, to be expected, because it is a transition year, they're on the same engine, so next year's F1 game might have finally a different Ego engine that Codemasters make. Maybe that's going to be the step up to allow them to make a better editor, but there needs to be 1000% a better livery editor and helmet editor. Has to happen, otherwise I will be criticizing them very harshly. Number 3. Now, this is ambitious, but at the same time, I think there's scope for letting this happen, eventually. I could see them, allowing this to happen eventually, is when you make air upgrades and just R&D upgrades in general in My Team career mode, I want to see visual, and this is, I say me, I mean, I want to see this. This is an idea I had last year, but at the same time, this was something that was thumbs up a lot in the comments by one of you guys in the community post, was seeing a visual difference in the upgrades. Now, I'm not talking anything crazy, maybe just a preset of, let's say, 10 different front wing styles, like the flaps and whatnot, or the barge wood area. Obviously, it's going to be different because next year's regulations are going to be very different. The cars are going to look a bit smoother and simpler in some areas, but still having different shapes to the nose cone, the barge area, the side pod shape, just having a preset of 10, and so as you go through the R&D kind of rows and columns, I would say tree, but there's no tree anymore, but the columns, in the menus, if you go through from left to right, as you progress through that R&D, the presets change to different ones that look more complex, look more unique, let's say, just to, give a bit of difference. I want a different looking car in Season 3 of My Team compared to Season 1. The livery may look different, but the shape of the car is the same bloody thing. So it would be great to have a different looking one. Let's say you get to, like, well, I don't know, Season 7, 9, 10. Season 10 of My Team. That car should look way more complex than Season 1. Obviously, if you have an R&D reset, that's also another cool thing. You could reset those visuals and go back a peg. So I think that would be really, really sweet. And it means everyone's My Teams look different. The career modes visually look different. They feel different on board, every second you're driving, if the car looks slightly different, the halo, let's say, if there's a bit of aero on the halo, for example, it's going to look unique and just give you that different feel season to season. Number 4 is, now, but this is kind of, it links back to clever AI, but choosing your teammate's strategy and maybe on the fly, if you get asked if you want your teammate to mimic your strategy, or do you want to mimic your teammate's strategy, and there might be, I don't know, almost like maybe like a quick time event, if midway through the race, it just, slows down a little bit, just to quickly ask you in the bottom right, your teammate's asking if he wants to, can he change strategy? We reckon it'll be better if he mimics your one. Do you want to accept that? Or even if you don't like that idea, pre-race, you just are able to set your teammate's strategy. So you can say, okay, I'm going to box this lap, you box this very next lap, or box before me. Because how many times have you double stacked with your teammate by accident because they can't change their bloody strategy? And on the fly, they need to be more clever. If I say box this lap, the teammate should then realize, oh, okay, I'm not going to box this lap now, and we're going to go on a different one. But yeah, just having more say in what your teammate does, because obviously your teammate, at the end of the day, best will in the world, as clever as the AI are, they are AI. They're a computer. So there kind of needs a bit of human element to that to suss out the best strategy, because sometimes, your teammate can let you down in a championship fight. It'd be better to have more of a say and kind of help him out. Obviously, if it's not a high-rated AI, sometimes they're going to be too slow, to make a difference. But if you gave them a clever strategy, they could make a difference. Because sometimes you have a good strategy, doesn't matter how slow you are, a good strategy can pay off big time with track position. Number 6. Now, this is a very, I think, simple one, but obviously the foundations of it, I can understand why it's not a thing right now in this year's game, is customizing the calendar completely. Right now, when you choose the calendar length of 22 to 16 to 10, you have to do it in the same order the calendar runs in real life. Now, I hope for next year's game, the foundations of the game and whatnot will allow that calendar to be customized completely. Have Brazil as race number 3, have, Australia back again at the end of the calendar, maybe, let's say, if Australia goes back to the front. Let's have, Singapore be the finale or whatever. Be able to completely change that. And also, I want more options compared from 22, 16, 10. I want to see at least, 22, maybe, let's say, I don't know, a good sweet ball in between, 18, 16, then maybe, 12, 10, and then even like a five lap, 5 race calendar, just for people who want to do a bit of a sprint calendar, sprint career mode, let's say. Just more customization also in general of, race distances as well. Having a slider for percentage of races. I know that's a difficult task because you have to train the AI to do every distance. So that's quite an ambitious one, and one that I don't see them doing, but it's a nice idea that they could have that. Other racing games have managed it, but I do realize also at the same time, those games that have managed it, i.e. like Project Cars, for example, their AI are atrocious. They're absolutely, they're horrendous. So there's a reason why they're able to train the AI to those percentages, because they actually don't race you very well compared to what they do on the F1 game. Number 6, this is a big dreamer, but you know what? I could see it happening with EA's backing. Bring Formula 3 into the game. I think EA would be the type of company to go, right, we've already got F2 in. This is the Formula 1 game. These are all the feeder series. We don't make separate games. Let's get F3 in here as well. More content in there. And it's like now the umbrella full F, the FIA, F1 ladder game of F3, F2, and then F1. And how sick would that be if then you could link that up in a career mode, for example. And then also, getting on to the next point, if you link that up, in the story mode, if there was a story mode again returning to the next F1 game, how cool would it be if the story mode linked together F3, F2, then F1, and multiple seasons at F1 like we saw in Breaking Point? That would be pretty sick. Yeah, F3, I like the idea. It's a pipeline dream. F2 was a pipeline dream and it happened. Now, I think, with more resources, for Cody's, could F3 happen? I think so in the next, at least 2 years, I would say, hopefully. And finally, the last idea, and this is building on what I thought was a success on this year's game, was another story mode. I want another story mode. Breaking Point, say what you want. I, personally, really enjoyed it. It did what a story mode does in a game like this. Remember, it's, you had story mode, and then you had My Team still to play as well all year round. So the story mode was never meant to last a long, long time. Just like any good single-player game, it's a solid story, and you just play it, and once you finish it, that's it. And then you play the multiplayer of the game or whatnot. Think of like all the single player games you play. There might be a small tacked on multiplayer, or that might just be the game. Whereas the F1 game, they actually pulled off something very unique. They had this massive My Team career mode that was already there. They have multiplayer that, loads of people league race on, there's esports on, and then they did a story mode. That's sick. Build on that. Do that again, and do it even bigger and better. Like, it was a decent length story mode. I think it was a decent story. It's a decent length story. I think I didn't lose my interest. At the same time, though, at the end of it, I was like, ooh, I could have maybe played one more whole season this maybe. So yeah, just a bigger story mode. I'd love to see, the return of like CGI cutscenes, even more of those, more kind of, voice actors involved, an even bigger story, like I said, that involves F3, F2, F1. I would love to see it. Whether it happens on next year's game, I don't know. We're seeing a pattern of there was a story mode in F1 2019, then it was My Team. That was the big thing in F1 2020. Then the story mode returned for F1 2021. So my guess is going to be that next year's F1 game won't have a story mode. There'll just be a very bigger and better and big changed My Team career mode, and they'll really go deep on the things, because My Team basically didn't change this year from F1 2020. So I think next year's game, they'll change it, and I think the story mode, if there is one to return, I think there will be because the reception was massive, I think it will return return for F1 2023, but I obviously wouldn't say no to it coming in F1 2022 as well, because I really did enjoy Breaking Point a lot. But those were then 7 ideas that we all want to see in F1 2022 directly from you guys commenting below on a community post I did recently. So now, comment below on this video and let me know other ideas that you have. Thumbs up other ones you see in the comments below, the ones you like, and the biggest ones, the best ones that thumbs up the most, I will collate into another video maybe down the line in a couple of weeks' time. But guys, if you did enjoy this video, hit the like button, let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you're new around here, then do subscribe for weekly Formula 1 content. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.